Hello and welcome to Get Rich Slow, the podcast that challenges the conventional get-rich-quick ideology and instead explores what authentic success really means and how you can achieve it. I'm Hannah Martin, the founder of Talented Ladies Club, and today I am joined by Andréa Watts. She is a coach, trainer, a speaker and author of Coaching Creatively with Collage, and we're going to talk about intentional choice, which is a really interesting topic for me personally. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, Andréa, what does success mean to you?
Hi, Hannah. Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me along. It's a real pleasure to be here and speaking to your audience. So that question, what does success mean to me? I have been thinking about this, and it's not an easy answer. In fact, there's more than one answer, I realised when I thought about it. And for me, personally, one of the big things is actually being at peace with where I am right now and who I am right now. I think when you're in business, particularly if you're self-employed, it's so easy to be thinking about the next thing, and especially if you generate lots of ideas and you can see where you'd like your business to be, that actually just being able to pause and be still and be okay with what you've achieved and where you are now, for me is a massive mark of success, actually. And I think your introduction about, the get rich quick, the idea that must be building, it's hard to not be dragged into that. And so, success, one of the measures for me is being at peace with what I've achieved and where I am, knowing there is more to come. The other measure of success for me, I have a vision for Unglue You, and it's to see the collage coaching technique used globally as a tool to help people release and maximize their potential. But the reason for that is the joy that I experience, and people who I've now trained in the technique, when they've said to me the joy we experience when our clients have breakthrough that leads to transformation and release and healing and clarity, freedom, and it helps them move towards their goals and what they want to achieve. And that joy for me is success. And that's why I have the vision, because it allows that the more people who access it, the more people will experience that transformation. And so what is my success is their success. What is their success is my success. And I love that interchange and the idea that success breeds success and that we succeed together. So that would be my second one. And my last one, while money has never been and will never, ever be my motivator, never, I do feel a level of success in the ability to generate my own income, to support myself, to do the things that I enjoy doing. And I think one of the reasons that's a marker of success for me is because there was a time when I didn't, Unglue You will be 10 years old, and for the first few years, way past when they say you should be generating an income and, surviving from your business, I wasn't. And so to be in a position where I am is, I'm proud to say it is one of my markers of success. So, there's kind of three things there for me. There's probably more. They change, don't they, as well? But,
Thank you. I love all of those. And especially, I think, number one is one of the reasons why I wanted to create this podcast, because there is so much out there that talks about always having more. Like you say, that there's, when is enough? And for me, when, like you, TLC did not make money for a very long time. And then I, couldn't see maybe even a time when it made enough money for me. And when it did, and it surpassed that, and it started ticking off these kind of, and I'm not going to name them, but the cliched kind of levels people say. And I reached one, and instead of being happy and thinking appreciative, I was like, oh yeah, but now I should be another level above. There's always there's always someone who's talking about more success, and especially financial. Yeah. And I think it's a really dangerous route to go down, because it takes us out of alignment with the purpose of doing it. Yeah. And as you say, the real measure of success is being today, right now, do I have enough, and am I happy, and am I content, and is my life meaningful and purposeful? So I love all of your measures of success. So thank you for that. So I'd like to know, before we start talking about attentional choice, like, what's your background? How did you get to start on Glue You? And what is Glue You?
So, yes, my background, very checkered, like I think many, again, self-employed people, when we come to business, we've done a bit of this and a bit of that. And for me, in terms of my career path, I started in retail, moved into social care, and that was in the voluntary sector. And I was there 15 years before starting Glue You. And when I look back now, I can see kind of like the breadcrumbs that, that fed into that, fed into that, fed into this. And Glue You was born from my love of art, my love of collage in particular. But at the time when I started it, sorry, Hannah, just to be clear, so I feel like I'm, sorry listeners, lost the thread a little bit there. Yeah, so I talked about my background, but as part of that journey through retail, social care and into Glue You, I knew that there was something that I wanted to do. I didn't know what it was, but I always knew there was something I wanted to do that would be connected to my love of visual creativity. And so I'd done an art therapy foundation course at one stage, thinking that would be the art I'd be able to help people, and I would be using my art or an art-based technique. But after a year, because it's an MA, you could do a year and decide whether you wanted to continue, I realised that art therapy wasn't for me. But it was so powerful in terms of helping me reconnect with the art process rather than what it looked like, and realising the power of images to tap our unconscious. And that, I think, is what fed into me starting Glue You. I will share the story of my collage, if that's okay with you, to explain. So when I was still in social care, I was starting to get unhappy in my role because I wasn't working directly with the clients I served. I was in senior management, so I was a step removed from them. And also, I wasn't being creative in the way that I wanted to be. And I knew it was, in fact, affecting my well-being. Plus, there had been massive cuts because of the financial crash. So there were all these external things as well as what was happening for me internally. So I went to see a careers coach, realising my well-being was being impacted. And I did an external visualisation. So a visualisation rather, where do you want to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10, etc. And I talked a lot about doors opening. So she suggested I go away and draw it. And Hannah, all I can say is when I drew it, the little stick figures really weren't cutting the mustard. They didn't express how I felt. And so I thought, Andréa, do what it is you do. Do a collage. And so I created this collage. And I think because I'd done the art therapy course, I instinctively worked with my unconscious. And I ended up with this image of a girl under a blanket. And when I saw that, I literally had this intake of breath, this really visceral physiological reaction. Oh my goodness, that's how I feel. I feel like the girl under the blanket. I feel hidden and restricted, unable to be seen, unable to express myself. And before then, I'd never had the words to express how I felt. I just knew I didn't feel good. And so I carried on, looking through the magazines, and I came across another image with a girl with her hand up, and I knew immediately that she was going to go next to the one under the blanket, and it was going to be right, Andréa, it's time to come out now. Carried on. And I saw this image of a lady in red, and she's dancing, and her dress is flowing out around her, and she's got like a red wash over her. You can't see her features. Her head's bent into the crook of her arm, her arms are up, and she evoked this real sense of freedom for me, the sense of movement and creativity and energy. And I love dancing, absolutely love it. And so I had a real embodied experience of, yeah, this is how I want to feel. I have no idea what I want to do, but I do know how I want to feel. And so that was probably one of my first recognitions of me making an intentional decision, because I actually called the collage the decision, because at that point I realised I wasn't prepared to stay in my job, that I couldn't stay under the blanket. And so I handed in my notice and I started my business. Now, it made it sound like, oh, you created this collage and then off you went and started this business. I had experience before of working with other people with collaging. They were bereaved carers and they would map their journey through grief through collage, and I would run this session once a year as part of a longer course. And for the first 3 years I did this, carers, they were bereaved carers, they would return with their collage to share it with the following group. And nobody asked them to bring their collage back to tell their story, but they did. So I thought, this means something. They've kept it. And they want to use it to share their story with others, to show them that they can get through their grief. They can have a better life beyond bereavement. And so between their experience and mine, I thought, I'm just going to give this a go. And so Unglue You was born, the idea of using collage as a coaching tool. Yeah, so
I love that. I love that idea of like kind of feeling, like understand your feelings rather than knowing your choices. Because I think actually that idea of knowing what we need emotionally, psychologically, kind of like, we also think about careers in terms of the actual job role we're doing, or, you know, like the status we're going to have, the title we're going to have, or what we're going to be physically doing. And what we don't often think about is actually what that gives underneath, because there are many things that can give that feeling. But we get tied up in, oh, I have to do a job that's in this. But understanding what feeling you want to meet emotionally, I think can free you up. Another thing you said, which I also really love, both of these things really resonate with how I live my life as well, was the idea that they're kind of, when you look back, there's this tree's rich like a trail of breadcrumbs. And I had a real sense of like, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I dropped out of uni and I was quite lost. And I felt, where's this path in front of me? I felt there should be a path. You know, when you go to school and some people are they know exactly what they're going to do. I didn't have that. And I realise now, the path is always the one you walk in front of you. It doesn't exist till you walk it. But when you look back, it doesn't really help any 18-year-old today, because they've still got to do that walk themselves. But you realise the path is the one you make. It's not laid out for you. And like you say, when you look back, if you do make, and that's why, you know, I love this idea of this podcast, what we're going to talk about. If you do make the right choices, then those breadcrumbs will line up and you will realise that every single thing you did led to where you are now.
yes.
And so I just want to say, everything that you've said there really resonates with me as well. So we're talking about intentional choice, and you sort of talked about your story there, which I think really perfectly illustrates how you've ended up where you are now and how this can work. But what do you think intentional choice actually means?
Yeah, so for me, you've talked there about the feelings and the things underneath, and the word that came to my mind was values. And so intentional choice is, for me, linked to your values. It's about who and how you want to be. It's something that's done on purpose and it's meaningful. And by meaningful, I mean it moves you towards achieving your aspirations, your goals, maximising your potential. So that to me is what intentional is about. It's about not making choices by accident, if that makes sense. And I can expand on that. I think the value thing is really important. But by accident, I mean, like you end up or you land up doing something because you didn't think beforehand where you were going with it. What might be the outcomes for this? Where am I going with this? Somebody else has suggested this. Society expects me to do this. And so you kind of like go with the flow, but not in the way that I think is a good way. But you're literally bobbing along and being carried by a current without thinking, well, where am I going with this? So, yeah, I hope that's clear. The main thing that I really want to get across is about the values and about who and how you want to be, and making choices. You use the word aligned, which I love that word, aligned to that, choices that are authentic.
So it sounds like it's, if you say, making choice authentic to you, but being intentional in that choice and not allowing things to influence or determine that choice. There are so many things, aren't there? I mean, you've talked about, people's expectations you might place on yourself.
Yeah.
Also circumstance. And there are times where people don't have the luxury of intentional choice as well, where they just need to earn some money, and the things they would really love to do require an investment of time or education or whatever, and they literally have to take a job. So I recognise that it's a privilege sometimes to have intentional choice, although even the micro decisions we make every day could help towards that.
Yes.
But it does. I do see, I don't know if you would agree with this, but a lot of it makes me feel really sad, but a lot of people living lives that they probably wouldn't choose given complete free choice. Because in some way they haven't made those choices. Not always because they weren't able to, but because maybe they didn't believe those choices were there to make even. Yeah. Do you agree with that? Do you think that happens to people quite a lot?
I do. There's a couple of things you said there. I think, the idea you said about the micro choices. And so I'm a woman of faith. I believe in God. And so part of my behaviour is related to trusting when I do certain things, he's doing something else somewhere else that makes things move forward for me as well. And as long as I'm walking in purpose and alignment, my path, I loved what you said earlier about the path. We create it, we walk it. It's not already there. And so the reason I mention that is I remember thinking, we talk about the micro choices, that in every moment we have a choice. As you said, all those little decisions, they are choices. And recognizing that we do have that choice, even if that choice isn't one that we like. Even if the choice is, as you say, I have to stay in this job because right now I need to earn money. It's a choice, and it may not be, because you could leave and then not have money and then struggle, but you've made a decision based on your circumstances. So I think there's something powerful in recognizing that even when it is challenging, it's not what you want at that moment, that you've still made your choice.
And that is such a powerful thing. I'm going to probably badly recall a scientific experiment now, and I apologise to anyone who knows the details of this. But I remember when I was trained to become a therapist, they talked about an experiment where they were torturing people, and they got some people they didn't scream as soon as they felt pain. They chose when to scream, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so they waited a bit longer, and that gave them some element of feeling of control in a situation where they were totally powerless. And they were able to endure more pain, and they were able to deal with that circumstance because they retained some element of control. So I think that what you said there is really important about, even when we may feel that choices are made or we don't have choice because life is in a position whereby our choices are huge choices taken away. But those, as you say, those micro choices, and even reframing it. I was talking to my cousin, and he really doesn't like what he does, was very unhappy. And then I met him one day, and he was looking quite different. And he talked about the fact that he'd been thinking, like, even though he doesn't every day like what he does, he said he recognised it gives him some freedoms. He was freelance, he likes travel, he could take time off, he earned good money when he worked. And just that simple reframe of that situation whereby I'm choosing to do this for a living, and it gives me some things, even though there are other things about it I don't like, enables him to be happier in his life and in that role. And it completely changed how he felt at what he did. Now, no circumstances physically had changed, but how he thought about it. And he said that I make a choice every day to go to work. That's my choice. I think that it can have a huge effect on, even if we can't change the physical circumstances in our life, how we feel about them and emotionally respond to them.
Yes, definitely. And as you were speaking, I was thinking that there's a great example, that reframe. And I worked with a client once. In fact, this person's in my book as a case study. And I've had other examples, but this one, I think 'cause it was early on, really sticks in my mind. But she was a mum, and she was on maternity leave, and she was deciding whether or not to return to work. And for her, what was going on was, do I return to work? Don't I return to work? How do I make the best choice for me? And she wanted to go back to work because she'd studied really hard. She's a lecturer, and she'd done well, you know, she's a senior lecturer. But there was that guilt around, I'm a mum, I should be staying at home with the kid. But wanting to, you know, to retain her position. And in the end, through doing her collage, she reached this place of acceptance. And it wasn't like acceptance where it's resignation and capitulation, oh, this is how it is. It was, I can go back to work and I can be doing, she wanted to be part-time, but she had to go full-time to begin with. But I can be doing something I don't want to be doing, particularly at this moment, knowing that in this space, I can still be moving towards what I do want to be doing. So for her, there was that added thing, yeah, I can be here. It's my choice. It's not the ideal choice. But if I can be okay with it, if I can be happy and accepting of that, then I can be putting my energy, instead of being like, oh, I'm upset and I'm not happy, I can be using that energy elsewhere to move towards what I do want to be doing and making those micro choices towards that.
Because I think that's, you know, the point is that life isn't perfect for anyone, really. No one has a perfect life. And there are going to always be situations in life that we're not going to want to be in. Things will happen to us and we will have less choice than we want. So I love this idea that intentional choice is both active, as in you proactively go out there and make choices happen for yourself, but also it can be reactive, in the sense that I'm now going to take a look at where I don't maybe have choice and reframe that for me and intentionally choose to feel differently about it. So it can be an action, but it can also be an emotional way of seeing things, can't it?
Yes, it can. It can. I like that, Hannah. Yes. Yeah.
And what can happen to us if we don't use intentional choice in either of those ways, either to actively make decisions for ourselves or to reframe situations we're in and find peace with it, and to own it ourselves in our own way by reframing? What can happen to us if in that situation?
I think going back to a bit of what I said earlier is around that being drawn down paths, that word again, that aren't right for us. Yeah, so I think there's a real danger in that. I think if we don't make the choices for ourselves, other people make them for us. We lose our sense of self. I really think that happens. And also you're less likely to achieve your goals or your dreams, your visions, whatever it is you're working towards, whatever it is that you hold in your heart as something that you'd like to do or the person that you'd like to be. I think as long as we're not being active about our decision making and making those intentional choices, then we can't be proactively moving towards them. I think that's an issue.
And how important do you think this idea of permission? Because one of my favourite books is Gay Hendricks' A Big Leap. I don't know if you've read it, but he always talks about how we upper limit ourselves, and that unconsciously we all have an upper limit of how much we either believe we deserve or can attain of something. And that can be, you know, material success, but it can also be emotional happiness and things like that. It could be anything. And I think often people maybe don't realise that they're even allowed to have a life that means something to them. They're allowed to be happy or successful. So how important do you think, did you come up against this with, when you work with people, about the permission to either to choose the things that you want or the permission to like the life that you have?
Yeah, I think this is a slight diversion from answering your question directly, but there's a couple of things you said that just made me think about fear, really. I think that there's two things. One is around, I do think there's that psychological awareness that we can one we can change, one that we're allowed to have things, you know, depending on your background. I was fortunate, and my mum was forever telling me I could be and do anything that I wanted to do. So I work from that perspective. And not everybody's had the privilege or the joy and that encouragement. So yes, I can understand the idea that, do I deserve this even? You asked if I've come across it. I think because the clients I have come to me because they want to move forward, I don't get it very often. But I remember working in a group once, and the lady chose an image of lions around. So it's in the desert, it's fine. You know, they have those pools of water, those lakes, and the animals will come and drink. And she had a group of lions, and they were head down, drinking the water. And she said, it's just made me realise that there is enough to go round, because she kept limiting herself, because her idea was like, I can't have more because that person doesn't have more or enough. And therefore, I'm not going to have what I can have or could create until that other person does. And then when she saw this image, it kind of like this inner wisdom, awareness, actually there is enough for everybody. And that gave her that word you used, that permission to start to move forward and start to create the life that she wanted for herself. So I think it's quite complex, isn't it, around choices. There's something about self-awareness as well, that you can make choices. And trusting, a big thing about trusting your choices, trusting yourself. You can make good ones. When you've made a series of ones where the outcome has not been what you had hoped or intended, it can, again, stop you making choices, making intentional ones. You think, actually, I'm better off letting somebody else make those choices for me. Or every time I do that, it goes wrong. So, yeah, it's complex. But I still believe, Hannah, that at the core of it, if people can trust themselves and make, even if they're small, just choices each day that they know are coming from a place of authenticity, that they know are linked to their values. I know not everyone even knows what their values are. But if you can make a choice that when you make it, it makes you feel good, or it feels, again, that feeling, it feels right, then it's almost like building a muscle. Learning to trust yourself. I did this small thing that happened, and even if it doesn't come out the way you want, I don't call them mistakes. I call them unintentional outcomes. Even if the outcome is unintended, right? You can still learn from that, and then make another choice and another intentional choice. So, yeah, despite all the things that can impact it, I think we can hold on to that, what I call truth. Can hold on to that, then things can still be good. They can still work out for us. We can still create the life we want.
And I think you've made a really good point there about, and I love, I don't know if you've read Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. Yes. So like her kind of thing. And she's like, there's never a wrong outcome, because even if where you end up wasn't what you hoped for, you've learned something, you've met people, it's taken you somewhere else. I had this exact conversation with my son this week, actually, because he's just got into university. And then I have had to pay like a huge amount for halls for him. Oh my God, university is so expensive, and the student loan doesn't cover it. That's a whole other topic. And he was really reticent about me paying that money. And then suddenly I could see that actually what he felt like was, what if university doesn't work out for me? What if I get to the end of the first year and I don't want to continue? And then he would have felt guilty because I'd spent that money. And as I say to him, like, it's my choice to give you that money, my choice to spend that money on you, and I'm happy to do it. And I'm not expecting an outcome from that. I'm buying your opportunity to go to university. And I also don't mind if you drop out, because I wouldn't see that as a failure. I would have seen you trying something that wasn't right, but having the courage to do it, meeting people, finding things out about yourself. And then being, and where you're going to be in a year's time after that experience will be totally different to where you'll be right now, not having done that. And I think, and not everyone has to do a year of uni and spend a year on halls to kind of make a big decision. But I think I certainly learned that in life myself, but having the courage to follow, as you say, your values and make a choice, sometimes make a brave choice, but be kind to yourself and accept that it might not work out. And that's fine. And don't feel like you failed or you've let anyone down, because you will have learned so much from whatever outcome you have, wouldn't you?
Yeah, 100%. And the example you gave of your son feels very much like when I did the art therapy. I went into that thinking I was going to be an art therapist, thinking I would study for 3 years, be an art therapist. I studied for a year, realised, oh, this isn't what I want to do. But it gave me so much. You know, I've still got 2 really good friends from it. Like I said, it freed me up my art practice, where before I was like, oh, it's not good enough. It freed me up from the aesthetics to reconnect with the process. And it is the foundation for Unglue You, and the collage coaching technique. So yeah, 100%. And the other thing I just wanted to add was, I think when we make our choices, it's really important that we remember that we make the best choices we can at the time with the information that we have. And that helps with being kind to yourself. And when you asked about what happens if we don't use intentional choice, I've just thought of something else that I'd like to add to that, is that when we do make intentional choices, then if the outcome isn't as intended, it frees us from that idea of, oh, we've made a mistake. Oh, I could have done better. Because at the time we made a very purposeful, meaningful choice. So whatever the outcome, it's okay, because we didn't fall into it by accident. It wasn't because mum said I better go and off to uni. It wasn't because blah, blah, blah. It was because I chose that based on and so whatever the outcome is, I'm going to be okay with it, and I will learn from it.
I think that is also part of having inner peace as well, which is a whole other thing. Mm. And like, I got divorced from my first husband in my early 30s, and psychologically that was quite a big thing to kind of forgive myself for entering into a bad marriage with a difficult person, let's just say, but then also being a divorcee. And the most liberating thing for me was coming to terms with those things, not seeing it as a failure, not seeing it as I've done something. Like you say, with the information I had to hand when I chose to marry him, I made the right choice based on what I knew then, or I made the only choice I could have made that was in alignment with who I was. And that choice didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but I've learned so much. And that freed me going forward for the rest of my life now, in accepting that, as I said, I can make decisions and I can accept either outcome, successful, and it's never as binary as that, but succeed or fail. I can accept either one. And I also know that even if the worst happens, I'll be fine. And that it will take me somewhere in life. And I think there's something really liberating that if someone is maybe sitting listening to this thinking they've made some real, maybe they're sitting listening thinking, I haven't made intentional choices in my life to date. My life isn't the life I want. Now I'm feeling really bad. Please don't. Because only by understanding that everything we do is with all we have to hand at that time, and we make the only decision we can do, can we free ourselves to move forward. And being kind to ourselves is so important, but also going forward, that inner peace and happiness and contentment. And I think it's more important than happiness. Contentment only comes from acceptance of all of that. So even if someone's listening and they're feeling bad, there's no need to, because the only place you could be is where you are now. Which leads me to, I really want to ask you a question. So I really like to give people advice. If they're listening to this, there's so much wisdom that you've shared in this, but if someone is listening to this going, I do understand how important this is, however I've not practiced in my life so far and I don't know how to start. So there's 2 parts to this. What is a small way someone can get started, and maybe tuning into their values and maybe listening? Maybe they're so out of tune that they don't know how to listen to it, firstly. And then secondly, how, like, maybe have you got some collaging tips about how they can, practically do that kind of stuff? But so first of all, how does someone tune in and start making those choices in a really small way?
I think with that, we have so much knowledge available to us, Hannah. But what we tend to do is stick to our cognition. We tend to stick to the pros and cons when we try and make a decision, and we really think about it. But we've already talked about our feelings, our emotions. But there's other types of knowledge we have as well at our disposal, and it's physical, spiritual, intuitive, and our unconscious. And I think if you can start to just tune into the broad range of knowledge available to us, and to the listeners, if there's, when you feel, your body will respond when you go to make a decision. It might be goosebumps, it might be like that intake of breath, it might be fluttering in your tummy. But try and tune in to how you feel emotionally, physically, spiritually when you go to make your choice. And then this is probably the bit that takes practice, and is a little harder to begin with. So I'd recommend starting with smaller decisions when you do this. But it's about that trusting. When you go to make that decision and you've drawn on all the sources of information, knowing that they're all valid, okay? We're holistic creatures. We're not just thinking beings. Trusting your decision, okay? Because sometimes fear can get in the way. Fear will be like, but I want to avoid challenge. I want to avoid conflict. I want to avoid difficulty. I want to avoid, stretching my comfort zone. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to make a mistake. There's something about noticing those thoughts that come when you go to try and trust. Noticing them, but then allowing them to just drift off. I like the visualization of a cloud on a sunny day. Just, clouds tend to melt away. I don't know if you've ever watched them, but they kind of just disperse. So allowing those thoughts to just disperse. So you notice them because they're likely to come, but letting them disperse. And then going and trusting your instinct, trusting your intuition. It's such a powerful way to help you make intentional choices. So that's the tip I would give, and I hope that somebody really hears that today and it really lands with them. And if they've already been feeling it but ignoring it, that today's the day. I'm going to go with it today. And then, as Hannah has mentioned already, that being kind to yourself, regardless of the outcome of that decision, knowing that it was made from this place of love for yourself, actually, made from a place of love rather than fear. So yeah, that's the tip with that. In terms of the collaging, I know I have changed. I'm not the woman I was 10 years ago because I collage constantly. I use it as a way to explore my thoughts, my feelings, my values. And the joy of collage is that you can see it, right? So you still have it afterwards. But if you don't want to create a whole collage, because there's ways of working with it that allows that unconscious thinking, as opposed to, just putting the images down. There's a way of working with it unconsciously. But you could start with images, just individual images. Maybe when you go to make a decision, if you have a magazine, I wouldn't suggest doing this online because you have to search for particular images. And if you're going to try working with your unconscious, then if you have a magazine and you go to make a decision and you're not sure, that you just look through the magazine until you come across an image that resonates with you. And by that, it makes you feel something. And that feeling, and for the purposes of this, and when I'm working with people, I say, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, for the purposes of this, I'd say, when the image, you feel that that it's aligned to the decision you're trying to make, it can help you, because I have quite a few, like the woman in red I talked about at the beginning. That collage is still up on my wall over there. And so when I go to make certain decisions, I think about her. I still embody her. And it helps me make decisions from that place of love, from a place of energy and creativity and movement and mindfulness, rather than the girl under the blanket. So if you can look through and there's an image that speaks to you about the person you would like to be or how you'd like to be, then I encourage you just to cut it out, take a photo, pop it as a screensaver, on your computer or on your phone, or just stick it up on the wall, so that you can look at it to remind you as you make those intentional choices.
I love that. And I think there's a couple of things that in all of that come out as really important. One is, like, we talked a lot about feelings, and I think being aware, and like you say, like asking yourself maybe, like, what am I feeling about this decision? And maybe that, then the images are almost a way of bringing up, because when you look at an image and the feeling comes, and then asking yourself why you have that feeling, what's that connected to? I think, rather, like you say, part of it is, like, if a negative feeling, just accepting it, but also asking, like, why do I have that feeling? Because sometimes our unconscious hides things from us, and we call it a gut feeling. But, like, if you start to sort of question those gut feelings, it could sometimes start to tell you, like, what is that connected to? A bit like my son in uni. I started noticing, like, from really wanting to go to uni and it being like he's so excited about it and getting off the university he wanted, he started talking about not going to uni. And I had like, what's he doing this? And I realised it was that fear. It's that fear that it's not going to work out. So then he started telling him he didn't want it. So he didn't have to embrace that decision or make that decision. And then once we kind of gave past that, and once I gave him permission to fail, then it was back to being excited again. So sometimes I think it's unlocking, isn't it? Like, why am I having that feeling? Not just kind of going, oh, it's fear. Like, well, it's got to come from somewhere. And then maybe if I understand why, that can then I can make a better choice as a result.
100%. And when I work with clients, and I said, as I'm guiding them to look through, I will say, gather the images that resonate with you, even the ones that make you feel uncomfortable. Very often they're the ones that lead to the breakthrough for clients. Because I think until we're able to explore that, what is that about? That's normally your fears, your blocks, your past experiences, bad memories. And until we're able to work with them, we can't move forward. That's what I believe. And because they are unconscious, you don't realise that they're there or what the root cause of them are. And while it's not therapy, it does have a therapeutic quality in terms of that exploration of self and that self-awareness of, when I'm making this choice, where's it coming from? There's this great book, which I can't remember what it's called, but it talks about how all our decisions come from a place of fear or love. And so sometimes when I'm like, I don't want to do this, I'm like, Andréa, why don't you want to do it? And when I unpick, and I might do a collage about it, it's like, there it is. There it is. And it is fear, normally always fear-based when I don't want to. Not always. Sometimes there's very, very valid reasons for me not to want to do something. But it's also, as you said, what's the reasons for that fear? So, yes, I think it is important to explore that. But for the purposes of the intentional choices, and because people will be doing this by themselves, I don't want people to kind of find an image and it's difficult and uncomfortable and there's nobody there to support them to work with it. So that's why I suggest the feeling that, like the lady in red, the who and how, and the values.
And it's definitely, I love the idea that you've still got her on your wall. And I think it's really important for us to have a vision of, because quite often we look at our regrets or what we don't want to have happen or we don't want to be, but having this really clear vision of who's the me I really would love to be, and having that very real, because unconsciously we will make decisions that align with that, will take us there, but we have to have that vision. So I really love, and I think, like, if we had to leave with any tip, I'm going to take that tip from you to leave to people, is that if you want to do one thing today, go and find a vision of the person that, with yours, the lady dancing in red, and, an image. It doesn't have to be literal, but that is in any way representative of how you want to feel, how you want to be, and owning that, and just feeling that feeling and allowing that to guide you in making decisions, I think is a brilliant thing. If someone took one thing away from this episode, I would say that know how you want to feel, and be really clear about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. And I love the fact that you said it doesn't have to be literal, because she holds for me, as I said, though, she's like a symbol, really. And the words that she holds for me, and the colour. It doesn't even have to be a person. I know people have trees and keys and all kinds of different things, but as long as it holds that feeling for you, and absolutely I'd encourage you, use a magazine to look. Please don't just Google something online, because then you're working from a conscious perspective. What you want to do is tap into that intuitive feeling that you have. Yeah.
But I've got a whole stack of magazines at home that my husband keeps trying to throw away. So I've like, no, darling, I have to keep. Now they have a purpose. I get a collage from them. He won't like that.
You can blame me.
I will. Don't worry. Speak to Andrea. So thank you so much, Andrea. If people want to find you, where can they go?
Okay, so the best place to find me is I have a website, and that's www.unglueyou.co.uk. There's lots of information on there, but I'm also on LinkedIn. I don't use any other social media platforms, but if you put in Andréa Watts and Unglue You, you'll find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be more than happy to connect with you there.
Thank you. And I just really, you saying that, I do hope, because we had a conversation at the beginning about Andrea's name because it's written Andrea. So I do hope that I didn't mispronounce your name at any point, and I apologise if I did. But thank you so much, Andrea. It's been lovely to have you on, and yes, and I do hope that people have found that helpful.
Thank you, Hannah. It really has been a pleasure, and yeah, I hope people have found it helpful. I hope some people will get in touch. I love meeting people, but yeah, really feel quite privileged to talk to people with you today.